Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Will Marm. I'm a Special Forces veteran and a graduate of Bancroft Capital's Veteran Training Program. Welcome to this quarter's Patriot Lunch, featuring Jeremy Bell, a soon-to-be retiring U.S. Army Special Forces officer. I put together this event, the Patriot Lunch, to highlight one high-performing transitioning veteran to you, the corporate America audience, for the singular purpose that I wanted to break down the barriers between corporate America and the transitioning veteran population. It's pretty amazing how divided and hard it is for these two entities to interact. I hope you guys through this event gain a better understanding of the unique skill sets, experiences, leadership that guys like Jay can bring to your company. Transitioning from the Army or the military is very challenging. It's hard. It's a process and it's critical. One of the steps is critical to build a network of professionals outside of the military. And so with this Patriot Lunch, we succeed when relationships are made and strengthened. And so afterwards, I'll connect you with Jay. And I encourage you to get to know him. He would absolutely provide substantial leadership and qualities to whichever company is lucky enough to pull him in. And what he would love to do is just figure out industries. And so just a 30-minute phone call after this with you or your compadres in your firm would help break down those barriers and accomplish our mission for this Patriot Lunch. We have time for a dialogue after, we have time for questions after our dialogue. So raise your hand, Zoom, knock on the screen, whatever you got to do to get our attention, and we'll get to you and have a dialogue. I want to give you an overview of Bancroft Capital. Most of you know Bancroft's special mission, but we have a really unique special mission and a line of business. We are a service-disabled, veteran-owned small business that operates as an institutional broker-dealer and a small investment bank. Through our best-in-class veteran training program, of which I'm a graduate, we accomplish our mission, which is to train and empower transitioning military veterans and first responders to succeed in the financial services industry, period. Bancroft takes the proceeds of their business lines, their lines of business, to pay for this mission. The core lines of the business are cash management, public finance, fixed income, debt and equity capital markets, secondary trading desks, and investment banking. So please remember Bancroft Capital if you ever need these services. We're happy to serve you, and that supports our mission. And you see right in front of you, Jay Bell is part of our Patriot Lunch class, if you will, now. So he is the main event. Welcome, Jeremy. Jay is a Special Forces officer. He's got incredible experience throughout Europe, Africa, and the Middle East. He's led troops in combat at echelons from young guy to old guy, for decades, quite literally for decades. He's received the Purple Heart. He's received a Valorous Award for his combat actions in Iraq. He has been through situations that you cannot imagine, both glorious and inglorious, hard and easy, and he's going to share some of them with us. When our nation has had a wicked problem that they need to attack and address, Jay was in it. He was figuring it out and working it through it. He's an intelligent and a compassionate leader, and he's got a wonderful family supporting him. Jay's been a friend of mine for many years. I think at one point he might have been my boss, maybe. I did what you told me to do.
That's right. I don't know if I was your boss.
And he's discerning his next move. So he graduated from West Point with a degree in engineering management. Pacific. He also has got an MA from Hawaii Pacific University in military and diplomatic studies. He's got a master's degree from the U.S. Army War College in strategic studies. And we're happy to have you all here, both you, Jay, and our audience. Please, Jeremy, Jay.
All right.
Give us
Great.
a personal introduction.
Well, thanks, Will. Thanks for that introduction, and thanks for giving me the opportunity this afternoon. Afternoon, everybody. First, thanks to Bancroft Capital. I love your mission, serving clients, country, and vets. That's fantastic, and I love that that you're putting this forum on. And Will, thanks for inviting me to this and giving me this opportunity. Great opportunity. And last, thanks to the audience. Thanks for coming out and participating in this great forum. What a great thing that we get to do. I think, Will hit it, hearing a little bit about a military career and, kind of bridging that divide between the civilian and military population is always a mission that we in the military want to do, and we want to get our stories out there. But also, like Will said, just making a connection is fantastic. So I love that. As I end my career, this is a good platform and jumping off point. I'm not going to go through my bio. I'd rather just kind of give you a sense of who I am. So if I had to define myself just in a few sentences, I'd say I'm a servant leader who gives all of himself to those in my life and those in my professional sphere. And I do that, and I get results in every place that I've been, and I drive, like Will said, towards solving complex, wicked problems, and that's what the military has allowed me to do over my 30 years in the Army. My style of leadership is mostly based on empathy, humility, bringing a genuine caring to the workplace, and then fostering trust, commitment, and ownership in those that I lead. I've learned over a 30-year career, first 4 of which was in West Point. That was kind of the leadership lab. I don't think there's a better leadership lab in the world, where you get to make mistakes and try out things and try out who you are as a leader before you get commissioned as an officer, and then ultimately take what you've learned and bring it to a real world problem. So I was commissioned as an armor officer. That didn't really quite fit my personality. Took a lot to get a tank out of the motor pool, and I wanted to really do my job. I wanted to train for it. I wanted to do it, and I wanted to make an impact in my career. And the best way I could do that was in Special Forces. And so I did the selection and the qualification pipeline in 2001, and I've never looked back. What a tremendous organization the Special Forces Green Berets are. And I think what I'd like to leave you with is these are a group of men and women who are true professionals in what they do. And one of the really important things in my life and what I focus on is I love leading high-performing organizations, and there is no higher performing organizations than the Special Forces Green Berets. They are deployed globally every day, 365 days out of the year, doing this nation's bidding, some of which is known and some of which is unknown. But what they do is create success where there is no success defined. And they do that through personal relationships, networks, and by really getting after solving problems day to day. And the reason ownership is so important to my leadership style and integral to how I lead is because what I've learned in the Green Beret, you deploy, in this case, a small detachment of 12 people around the world in an ambiguous environment, and you say succeed, and you don't know what success is, but they solve problems each and every day. And they do it because there's nobody else around them. They can't look to their left and right and give a problem to somebody else. This detachment, this group of people at whatever level, solves problems themselves. They own it from start to finish.
Thanks, Jay. That's that's quite an opening monologue. Creating success where success isn't defined. That's a really unique way to say things. And man, you hit that on the head, because how many times have we got missions that say, go figure it out?
That's right.
Report back if you have any questions, but just not immediately. So we're going to try to cover a couple, 3, 4 subjects that we've agreed upon, and that's really the format of this, as you know, but for the audience's edification. You've served, Jay, in a number of intense combat operations and deployments. You've sacrificed tremendously. Share with us a particular event or an event that you consider memorable.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it kind of goes back to my first mission in SF, and it started off in a strange way. I was asked by the group commander. The group is, about a 2,500 person organization and has all the SF detachments underneath it. And so the group commander asked me, I had just gotten to the unit, 10th group at the time, and I was that guy, right? Like, hey, you're going to Iraq in a day, like, get ready. And I had just graduated from the Q course. And the reason I went to Iraq was the group commander wanted coins to give out to his folks as they were leaving country. So that was my mission. I did it, carrying 500 pounds of coins all the way across the world to the group commander. And I became the executive officer for one of the companies, the stay behind company, when 10th Group was picking up from northern Iraq and redeploying back to the United States. And our job was to cover all of northern Iraq and make sure that the networks that we had built over the invasion were stabilized and that we were networked into them. And so one of our missions was to drive around to our mission sites all around northern Iraq and deliver supplies and things that they couldn't get on their own. And so one of those missions was driving from Kirkuk to Tikrit in central Iraq. So about a 2-hour drive on a good day. And so we normally take Toyota Hilux pickup trucks or Land Rovers is what we were driving. But we decided, since that was a pretty well-known vehicle for our adversary. This is in 2003 when the insurgency was in its infancy, but it was really starting to pick up in its attacks against the US forces. We decided to borrow the Air Force vehicles, and they had just rolled these things off of the plane, and they gave them to us. And we were driving from Kirkuk to Tikrit. And we encountered an ambush. It was a vehicle ambush. So we were going at a high rate of speed through a small village, and a truck came out from a side street, pulled up behind us, and then shot quite a few rounds into my vehicle. My vehicle was the principal target, but there was one or two bullets that entered the lead vehicle. We were just in a 2-vehicle convoy, and so my vehicle was hit. We went off the road and we flipped the vehicle probably 8 or 9 times. The lead vehicle, like I said, only had 1 bullet, so they kept on going. They kind of left us, which they should have, get out of the kill zone. But I found myself in a burning vehicle with 4 other people, one of which with a head trauma. We couldn't even find him. He was ejected through the windshield. He was shot in the head. The driver was probably in the best shape, and then the other guy had extremely broken bones. And so it was up to me as the leader to manage this situation. And one of the things I came away with is, you can't train for everything in the military, but you can prepare. And I didn't have the training to do this particular thing, but I had the foundation that allowed me to manage crisis the way I did. I had to adapt quickly, find everybody, pull in as much equipment as we could, try to gain communications with our lead vehicle, none of which worked. And all the while, the vehicle is burning to a crisp, and we're trying to crawl ourselves out. Luckily, the ambush vehicle sped on and didn't engage further. So I was able to collect everybody in a relatively secure way. And then I had to find a way to go to a hospital because I had somebody shot in the head. I had broken bones. I had other injuries. So I confiscated a vehicle. It was funny, at gunpoint. It was a family of probably 6 or 7 in this van, and I pulled them over. I made them pull over, and then we all got in the back. Luckily, we were able to link up with our lead vehicle, and then the medevac process kind of took over from there. But it was definitely a high pressure situation. And I think the main thing, when you're dealing in that type of situation is you can't wish for things to be different, right? You have to deal with the crisis and the situation as it is. So taking in all that information, taking in all that complexity, processing it, analyzing it, and then just acting, and sometimes just reacting is good enough in some of those situations. Over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Jay. Great points. That's quite a story. And I share our gratitude for you and your leadership with the audience as they heard through it. But a lot of good takeaways there. Foundational training to manage the crisis. And you just have to deal with it. Just take the responsibility, own it, and do something. Just move in the right direction. And a lot of people think that's superhero work. At the end of the day, it's what you have to do. And so
absolutely.
Thanks for sharing.
What I would say, everybody survived that situation, and it was because we were well trained. Not everybody survived the same way they went in, but everyone survived, and I count myself lucky for living through that, but also living through the aftermath, which was pretty significant for me with a lot of internal injuries. Yeah, right.
Yep. Thank you for sharing with that. So that was at the small, kind of ODA level, the Special Forces team level. Let's move to fast forward, and you are a Special Forces battalion commander, which is in my kind of, I'm trained Russian and German speaker. So in my French and my street French, that's the creme de la creme of the Special Forces, unit to be able to get to and deploy and train and lead and employ. What's the most challenging problem set you tackled as a Special Forces battalion commander?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think maybe I'll provide a little bit of context on why you say creme de la creme, right? So an SF battalion is about a 550 soldier organization, and it's really diverse, right? It's large, 550 people. It's got a diverse mission set. It's got a complicated structure and a complicated mission that we do. So, manning, training, equipping, employing all these operational detachments all over the world. So it's really my first foray into organizational leadership. And so one of those things where you transition from direct leadership in small organizations and units to larger organizational leadership where you don't have the luxury of directing, you have to lead. And you do that by purpose, direction, motivation, by giving people the tools to solve problems at the lowest level. And so I did that. And I think you're most successful in an organization as large as that by choosing who you put where and when to do what mission with the right expertise to do it. And so that's what the whole Syria mission set was all about, right? So we took over, this was in 2015 into 16, and we were at an inflection point where the mission was dead in large part. In a mission like that, what you expect is we were tasked with building a resistance force inside of Syria that could expel expel ISIS from Syria. And normally in a mission like that, you're on the ground with your partner force, you're training them, you're employing them, you're equipping them, you're paying them. And we had none of those mechanisms when I took over. And so what we had to do is build the operational employment of that mission set back up to a point where we could man, train, equip, put boots on the ground, actually advise our organization. But this is the complexity of Special Forces. That's what we wanted to do, be on the ground with our force, but we couldn't. So we had to figure out other ways, virtually, through telephone, through WhatsApp, it didn't matter, whatever mechanism to solve these problems. And by the end, so we started with the only ability that we had was to equip our force in Syria. And by the end of it, we could man, train, equip. We had boots on the ground inside of Syria. And that happened not because of my leadership. It happened because I put the right people in the right place to do the job. It was all bottom up driven. It was CONUP by CONUP, getting approval from the president to do what we needed to do. And that's a hard mission to do. But one of the things I was asked to do was to negotiate an international agreement between Turkey and the Kurdish forces inside of northern Syria. And the situation was the forces that we were training in northern Syria were not good. And they were largely in a defensive battle in one part of northern Syria. The most dynamic force that we had were Kurdish forces. Oh, so those forces were largely Arabic, not Kurdish. The most dynamic force that we had was the Kurdish forces in the northeast portion of Syria. But if anybody knows anything about the history in that region, that is the arch enemy of Turkey, and they would never be willing to work with them. Well, that was my task, is negotiate an agreement where Turkey would work with these Kurds. And so we got to a point, it was about 7 months of negotiations and probably 7 different conferences and negotiating sessions. And you would normally think, oh, the State Department would take that on, or if not the State Department, then the military higher commands would take that on, or the Joint Staff, or anybody other than Lieutenant Colonel Jeremy Bell. But that was not the case. So I was the one stuck with putting all of this together. And you had to start with, okay, what is Turkey's primary concerns? And let me kind of whittle down why those things are not concerns, or let me give you the real truth of what is happening. So you have to walk Turkey off a ledge on those particular issues in order to get them to the negotiating table. And that took about 6 months to do. Finally, we got to a point where they were comfortable operating everything out of my headquarters. And so we would provide that situational awareness and that plug-in for Turkey. And so we were the trusted agent in that network. And then just as we got everything together and put in a good place, sure enough, a coup happens in Turkey. And you got a bunch of Green Berets sitting in Incirlik, Turkey, and they're like, and the Turks are pointing fingers at us, saying, hey, you guys did this, right? Which is a natural conclusion, right? We're Green Berets, that's what we do. We go in and we start insurgencies. In this case, we did not. But we had to suffer the consequences of that, right? They turned off all of our power, all of our sewage, all of our electricity. Like we were camping for a good portion of July into August because of that. So again, just dealing through complexity, and truly, I think the key there is owning the problem that you're given. And no matter how big the problem or how complex it is, if you have a team of folks who work on this, and you can get to yes on almost anything. In this case, getting the Turks to work with their arch nemesis.
Hey, that's good. Because I was ancillarily around that. I was not obviously in Turkey. They leave in letters. They leave letters for you, little love letters, little love notes for you. I'd heard that was one of the techniques that they used to intimidate you.
The Turks?
Yeah.
Yeah, they would. Yeah, so they would put us in weird positions. I never got a letter, but they would put us in weird positions where our partner force or our forces were butted up against the Kurds and almost forced to do something. So being, thinking through problems like that before they happen so that you can get ahead of it, like huge.
Oh yeah. Of course, our prayers go out to the that area, the region right now, as a result of the back-to-back earthquakes. You were operating in that entire region and entire area, and
absolutely
can only imagine the devastation that's being, that's happened. And so, continue to pray for them. So, and then the takeaway I wrote in my notes here: get to yes.
Yeah,
become a trusted agent amongst the two conflicting people that basically want to kill each other, and and get to yes, find
absolutely.
that. So I like to ski. So you're looking for that run down the mogul field, and oftentimes there's just you're going to hit something.
Absolutely.
You just got to figure out which smaller mogul you can hit so that you can emerge on the other side and get
The
to
other
yes.
kind of thing that dovetails into that is, it's a coalition of the willing, right? And you have to build that. It doesn't just come. So getting other folks to make your argument for you is powerful, or bringing in a coalition that can build trust to solve a problem is also a huge benefit.
Yeah, sure thing. They buy with and through.
Absolutely.
And ultimately, Green Berets don't want that that recognition. They would rather the
100%.
recognition goes to their partners.
Yep.
Okay, great. So we'll move. I think we're doing pretty good on time. We'll go to to our next subject there. You've done some hard things. You've navigated pretty complex problems and obstacles, and some things that we truly, as Joe civilian American, can't imagine. Share with us a story about the IED on your house in Iraq, and
Sure.
how you learned about leading, motivating, focusing people when life literally crashes in on each other.
Yeah, that's a good one. So I just told you about my first experience in Iraq. This was my second experience, or second deployment to Iraq. So, so to Will's point, I was in an IED strike on my house. So a water truck, so think of like a cement truck type thing, filled with about 2,000 pounds of explosives, and the rest of it was filled with gasoline. And it rolled right through all of our security and detonated just outside of my house. And so I started to get a complex, because this is now the second time I'm in Iraq, and now the second time I'm somebody's trying to kill me in Iraq. But the mission that we were on in that particular town, it was Tikrit, Iraq, was to get ahead of the insurgency that was building in central Iraq, and to do that by going after the insurgents themselves. So largely manhunting. And we had built a reputation in Iraq for being pretty effective at what we did. And so each of us, the leadership in particular, had bounties on our head. And we knew that the Iraqis were targeting us. They wanted to blow up our house. And we thought most likely that would be RPGs or some sort of ambush type of attack, or a hit and run attack. And we had gotten word earlier on that, our house was in danger. So we took measures, but it didn't matter that morning. It was about 6 o'clock in the morning. We were just kind of getting up and getting set for the day. And this water truck rolls right through all of our security and blows up. And I was about 40, 50 feet away, but most of us were inside a building. And that's really what saved us. A lot of combat is luck and timing. In this case, luck and timing both worked in our favor. We weren't out and about just yet, largely contained in the house. And there was a wall about 20 feet of space, and then, a pretty substantial building. So everybody survived. But again, you're forced into a situation that you are not truly prepared to deal with. And in this case, my house is on fire. It's collapsing around me. I'm in flip-flops, trying to weave my way through rubble and trying to get a sense of the chaos, because the initial attack is only the initial danger. After that, there are dangers both created by the initial blast, like structural type things, and then there's the actual danger of a follow-on ambush. So there was really only a handful of us that actually reacted. And so this is one of those lessons, right? When you have even a high performing team and something happens, you really can rely on about 3 or 4 people to make a difference in an organization. And I had that. So there was a group of folks that was working with the security forces and pushing them out and getting the perimeter pushed out. There was the medic who was trying to deal with all of the injuries from the blast. Myself, coordinating responses, getting the security forces and QRF, the quick reaction force from the Army, into our compound. But then, once you're done with the initial crisis, and leading through crisis, for a Special Forces Green Beret, officer is not a, it's something that we do well and we're selected and trained to do. But the aftermath of putting all of that back together was huge. It was hard, right? There's the physical building back of a building and our compound so we can get back to work. There's the emotional side of this, of getting everyone back on their feet and in a good place. And then there's actually going after the network that targeted us. And so for the next month, that's what we did. And we couldn't get after the folks that we wanted to get after. And so we had to be more creative. And so we went after all of their family members, and we made their life a living hell for about 3 weeks. And in the end, the father of the main insurgent brought the son to our compound and said, "I'm turning him in. Here you go." So we were able to end our rotation in a successful way, even though we had to overcome quite a bit to get there. But we pulled together as a team to do that. And that's what high-performing teams do.
Thanks for sharing the story, Jay. Find the 3 or 4 people in your organization that you can rely on.
That's right.
That's brilliant, and we've seen that a lot of times.
Absolutely.
Leading through crisis, got it. And then the father. I'm gonna make the story the father-in-law turned his son-in-law.
There you go. Much better.
Just for some levity, of course. So this next one, I think, is going to be most applicable to the audience. You were a garrison commander. You were the Fort Campbell, Kentucky garrison commander, a small city. Inflows, outflows, bills, employees. It's like being a city manager, but with a lot more responsibility. Can you talk us through that? How that helped you prepare for this next career change, this next season of your life?
Yeah,
also, before you do, save your questions, because we're going to have a few minutes at the end for questions and answers.
Awesome. Yeah, so I'll give a little context of what a garrison commander is. So like Will said, all of our installations are like cities, right? And Fort Campbell is a medium-sized city that has to support a population of 250,000 people, has a budget of $250 million, and has an employee base that runs all of this of 2,500 people. And so this is like the epitome of organizational leadership. And when you take over a command like that, so essentially city manager / mayor of a medium-sized city, what you quickly realize is you have nothing to base your leadership on, right? So in every organization the Army develops you for, inside the kind of the tactical units, you are prepared to do that at every level. In a garrison, you are not. You have no experience in all of the things that a city has to do, everything from public works to water to sewer, your electrical grid and power generation, fire, police, business operations that you have to run and you're responsible for making a profit on, all the soldier services. And then you add on top of that the military component, all the training locations that you have to manage and resource and maintain. And then I have to run 2 airports for not only for Fort Campbell, but I also have to control airspace for Tennessee. And so Fort Campbell's located in a very strange place. It's in between 2 states. You have Kentucky and you have Tennessee. And what I love about Fort Campbell is it's kind of the best kept secret in the Army, is everybody loves you there. They are true community partners and they want you to be a part of that. So Garrison Command, and I won't give you kind of the nuts and bolts of what I did. What I'll tell you is they called it the 7 plagues of Colonel Bell. Like, it was crisis after crisis in that job, everything from ceiling collapses in housing to housing crisis and barracks crises to lead-based paint issues and water contamination because my, a groundhog crawled into my water supply, all the way to COVID, right? And these are all things that you have no experience, and honestly, no one in the organization had any experience in dealing with. And you have to lead this 2,500 person organization through all of these different things. So it was not like organizational leadership is never about direction, it's about leading. Well, Garrison Command takes leading to the next level, and that is all about how do you collaborate and how do you build, again, a coalition of the willing around you to really get after large, difficult, complex problems. And so despite, 7 crises or the 7 plagues of Colonel Bell, that organization was still able to succeed, right? We were named the #1 installation in the world. We had billions of dollars of investment during that time period. We made improvements in the organization and our people, and we could do that because we were distributed. It wasn't all about me as the garrison commander, it was all about us and what we could do as individual organizations within a pretty complex structure. And so this was pivotal for me because it took all of what I've learned over a career and kind of, I got to encapsulate my leadership style in this one organization and how I led. So basically it was this, I was not the expert. I was never going to be the expert in public works or security or fire, but I had experts to rely on. So I was going to trust them, and I was going to power down the execution of every task to the appropriate level where the expertise resided. And that was my whole philosophy. So built on trust. And in order to do that, we had to, at the lowest level, build a sense of ownership, that what you were given is yours and you own the mantle of its success. And then the last piece I realized early on in that command is in organizations like that, where everything is just expected to run smoothly, they largely don't get recognition for what they do. And so recognizing employees for their tremendous work and the accomplishments that they do on behalf of the greater organization is so, so important.
Yeah, those are that's amazing points and an experience you had there. Airspace, I'd forgotten that you had to control airspace. I mean,
That's right.
That's no small feat by itself. Obviously, you've got experts that are doing that, and
yeah, so this is a good point. So you have experts that are really tied into the problems that in the day-to-day operations, but being a leader, right, means pulling them out of the day-to-day and making them focus on the future. And a lot of times you don't have time to do that. So that's where leadership comes in. You've got to take the time to develop a strategy, and you don't achieve success like we did at Fort Campbell without having a vision, a strategy that gets you there.
Yeah, those skills, techniques, if you will, that you learned throughout the course of your career are going to immediately add value to a corporation that picks you up. Period. It's going to, you can't build that overnight, and I'm excited to see where the path takes you, here next year. I will say, per your comments about the contaminated water, I'm gonna send you a bottle of spring water on Groundhog's Day, like as often as I can, because I can think of almost no like gross besides like dropping like fuel in your water in Hawaii, like.
I know,
Like
right?
dropping like a dead groundhog in the water supply is probably the
Even,
next.
okay, so this is a good one. So even something as simple as a groundhog crawling into your water supply and contaminating your water supply, right? Like there's the initial crisis of, hey, get it out there, boil water notice, like stop drinking your water, right? But this is one where it took the whole of the installation, even units and organizations not part of my control, to actually fix the problem and get on top of it, right? Like it took our support brigade and all that they had to do to purify water for troops and for all the different organizations out there. It took all the transportation stuff, all like everybody had to work on everything to fix that problem.
No, yeah,
Crazy.
it's amazing. And thankfully you're home and you can go home and try to escape from the madness, but of course everybody's got your phone number, so there's no work day.
There is none.
Some of the corporate America doesn't quite know about the military, particularly when you're in leadership positions. You're getting calls Sunday morning, Saturday night, Super Bowl weekend, what doesn't matter. And
So
and you
one of the
truly do give.
things,
Go ahead.
I'm sorry, good. I was saying one of the things that that I did as a garrison commander is I ran the employment and transition programs for the military soldiers getting out. And one of the things I would tell businesses is, you may think that you're taking a risk by taking a military veteran and bringing them into your organization. And to your point earlier, what I would say is you're not, right? These are proven individuals that are truly dedicated. They want to serve something bigger than themselves. They have true ownership in what they do each and every day. But you're bringing a wealth of experience that a workforce on the civilian side wouldn't necessarily have. And what you get on the end of that is a really solid leader who can solve problems.
Jay, I mean, I don't know if I can tee up a conclusion better than that. Thank you for that. And we are approaching the end of our allotted time frame. The audience are adults; they can jump off whenever they want. I just out of courtesy, I'd like the opportunity to offer up one question to the audience. If anybody has texted me or I have one here.
I'll take as many questions as folks want if they want to just stay on too.
That's nice of you. Thanks, Jay. For the audience, anybody have anything that they want to talk about?
Yeah, I'll ask the first question. This is Carl Kaufman.
Thanks, Carl.
You've had an incredible background, truly. And the people you've commanded are to be commended. Now, when you go to corporations, we have a thing in civilian life called entitlement, which I don't know, how much of that is pervasive in your experience. How do you deal with that when you're, trying to motivate people and recognize them when they feel that, the way this country is kind of leaning towards? How do you make that transition from an organization where people are trained to take orders and from an organization where people are not? They're trained to argue.
Yeah, that's a great question. Maybe I'll answer it more broadly first. So my style of leadership is never about being directive and telling everybody this is what you will do. Because what I found is collaboration is much better at solving problems. And when you can build consensus in organizations on a complex problem, what you find is people are behind you because they had a part in creating that solution. And so that's kind of a cornerstone of what I do and how I approach things. And I learned that largely on the joint staff. I was in the Deputy Directorate for Special Operations and Counterterrorism, which is an office that takes global requirements for special operations and pushes them through to approval, largely to the president for approval. And I was amazed by this organization. Everybody owned their portfolio and there was complete trust. Even if you were only there a day and your job required you to go up to the Secretary of Defense and brief something, the whole team of teams got around that individual, prepared them, got everything together, and that it wasn't anybody else. It was the person who owned the portfolio was briefing the senior leader on whatever topic that was. And so when you have ownership and when you have trust in an organization, these things just happen. And I'll talk a little bit about culture because I think that's really kind of the crux of what we're getting at in this question. Culture is king. It is everything. It is what happens when the lights are out and there is no guidance to be given. That's your culture. So when somebody is out there on their own doing something on behalf of the company and they don't have guidance, they rely on and they draw upon what they've learned. And that's your culture. That's what and it's hard to define. It's hard to get your head around. But I think what you want is a culture that is aligned with the organization's goals, with its vision. And sometimes that happens and sometimes it doesn't. And being in a position where you can adjust when it's not is important. As far as, the societal stuff versus the military stuff and how do you, like, for me, when the society is in turmoil and we have issues and we're working on them, or we're just, butting our heads up against a wall sometimes, I found with my workforce, it's just better to address those things up front and be honest and genuine and just have a discussion. Does that answer your question?
Thank you. Very helpful.
Thanks, Carl, for asking. And we have two more that's popped in. Javette, would you please go ahead?
Yes, I would like to start off with saying thank you for your service, Colonel. I'm a veteran also, and I also work for the U.S. Department of Education in the Small Business Office, OSTABU. I don't know if you're familiar with that terminology. It's the Office of Small, hold on, my earplug just fell out. Sorry about that. It's the Office of Small Business Disadvantage Utilization. And we deal with this issue all the time, regarding diversity, equity, inclusion. Veterans are looked at as not having the proper skills all the time to do the work. But, we need to get more involved in these conversations. So thank you all for inviting me. I know Bill sent me the invitation, and thank you so much for sending this because, when we meet at the council on a federal level, this is the thing we need to do is encourage veterans to open businesses because they're highly qualified. They're highly capable of doing the work. A lot of times I know when I got out of the military a while ago, sometimes I couldn't transfer my transferability of my skill set over to a language that was understood by the corporate workforce. And so I know recently in the last 10 years, there's been a lot of pushback on getting these skill sets, these knowledge, skills, and abilities transferred over so that the hiring officials can understand what this person actually did. Because, in the military, you do more than one job. You wear many hats. So you're a great leader. You're also a great project manager because you know how to resource allocate and manage resources. And that's what we need today to really move the needle is, like Colonel had mentioned, is the strategy. You have to have a strategy. And so my question is, how do we change the narrative? How do we do some myth busting? Because, there is plenty of qualified. And then if you look at the statistics, I'm all about data. Data drives the strategic plan. So if we collect this data, and we see that the veterans are at a disadvantage in the marketplace, how do we build that capacity to capture everything that's so great that these service members are doing? How
That's
do
great.
we do
question.
that?
That's a great question. So you hit on one point that I'll address right up front, and it's one of my worries too, is how do you translate your military career into something that a business wants to hear? And I don't know exactly how to do that. I'm kind of fumbling through that myself. I think, Will and this forum are a good way to do that, right? So if you have these discussions and you can kind of see what a military career looks like, you're better postured in the hiring process to bring those things out and say, okay, it's not really applicable in these terms on the military side, but this is how it applies to my business, right? And you can bring that out of a veteran during the hiring process. But as far as changing the narrative, I think it's got to be a grassroots thing. I started, again, I owned military transitions on Fort Campbell. I started with the premise that when a soldier is wanted, that's where they're going to most likely go, right? It's when there's a vacuum that where the soldier doesn't know where to go, that there is a problem, right? And so the transition process tries to help them work through that. But what I found is when the company said, I want, and they go to the installation X, Y, or Z, it doesn't matter. They say, I want this type of person for this type of position, and I want to make a match. Like, that works, because the folks that are doing transitions on the installation side want to create that match. And if you're creating that demand signal, you're matching up the supply with the demand, like that's a pretty powerful thing to do. It's just hard to navigate the military system side, and it's hard for businesses to kind of break into that sphere. So I don't have anything more than that on your question, but I hope that answered at least part of it.
Wonderful, Jay. Thank you. Two more. What at this point from Joe, can you say what can you say is your post-military vocation? What's your dream job?
Dream job.
Where is the dream job?
So I'm working through this as well. So part of it is translating what I do into, civilian sector. That's kind of hurdle number one. Hurdle number two, like I'll stay in the Virginia area. So I have two kids, one of which will graduate high school this year, and then one is a sophomore. So I have about 2.5 more years before he goes to college. So I'll be staying in the area. Dream job, and what does that mean? So I think for me, I love high performing teams. I love workforce development. My mind is good at efficiencies. So, looking at systems and processes and making sure that all work together. So that's important to me. If I could take my experience on the garrison command side and work as a city manager, that's an option. But I'm not closed off to, just that option. I'm kind of open to any type of work out there. So anything from consulting work to even working for kind of those larger corporations that do defense contracting. I'm open. I think if I had a dream job, I don't think it would be anything specific. It would just be one of the most important things that I learned later in my career is I just want to enjoy the people I'm working with, and I want to enjoy the boss that I work for and the people that I work with. So, working in a culture that is welcoming, that wants me to be there, that recognizes my contribution to the company and how I serve, really, that's what I'm after.
Yeah, wonderful points there. The culture matters.
It does matter.
Susan, did you have a question? I saw a hand raised.
Actually, it's me. We'll give it a moment or two for the camera to whip around. We're in this high-tech environment where the camera
Nice.
finds the person that's speaking. Eventually it'll come to me, or it won't. Either way, we're okay. So Colonel Bell, my name is Cal Quinn. I want to personally thank you for what you provided, the message you offer, for your ability to ambassador for all of us service members and to represent us in such a powerful way. What you have done in your career is indicative of what those around you that have supported you through your career have allowed you to achieve. I know you know that, and I know that people are impressed by you, but I'm even more encouraged the fact that they would be impressed by those that work with you, the staff NCOs, senior enlisted, who kind of made your career possible. From the standpoint of identifying your skill sets and translating those into what's valuable to civilian employers, I think, sir, you've done that brilliantly today. Anybody who is an employer of individuals, as I am, listens to you talk about your experiences, more importantly, your methodology and approaches to managing yourself through those various and difficult circumstances, often in life or death situations. You have a tremendous set of skills, as do those that you've worked with over the years, and you're going to benefit any organization that is lucky to get you. I will offer my personal support to you, sir, helping you to translate, connect, navigate, network. We've done it quite a bit. I'm actually sitting at the table with a gentleman who was a Marine who started his career clearing minefields in Guantanamo Bay, became one of the youngest individuals to own a seat on the floor of the New York Stock Exchange, and has spent a good part of his life supporting veterans. I shouldn't speak for him, but I will, as he nods his head. Nods his head. I'm sure he's interested in helping you as well.
Yes, Colonel Bell, you hit all the points. Key to life is mentoring, right? Translating those skills as you come out. It's bad enough you show up with this horrible Brooklyn accent, but I was still speaking militaryese when I came out of the Marine Corps. So it's so important to be able to do that because, as you know, those people who have served this great nation of ours are able to go out there and do so many great things. But it's just figuring out exactly where they fit in. And culture, as you said, sir, is so important. And so thank you for your service.
Hey, Colonel Bell, I think we've got some folks here that we spent much of our lives trying to help, not just folks like you, but even folks who have maybe less of an advantage and less of an opportunity, maybe less of pedigree. You're going to be an easy place, right? And happy to help you in any way that we can. I would ask you this question though, because we don't often get the opportunity to speak with folks who have worked. We work with the SRUs, right? So we work with the recovery component of disabled veterans, but we don't often get the perspective of somebody who's run a transition unit inside a military installation. What's the biggest challenge that you saw? And you talked about kind of veterans feeling like they had a home and were wanted, but what is the greatest challenge you saw in transitioning service members, especially senior enlisted, staff NCOs who have 15, 24 years of experience, but they're transitioning to civilian careers and really have a hard time doing it? What's the biggest challenge you've seen for them, and your thoughts in how we can support, we being the civilian hiring community, we being military veterans who want to support other veterans? How can we help those young men and women address that challenge?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I'll start first from a structural standpoint, an organizational standpoint. Matching up supply and demand is the key to this problem set, and it's not easy. It's hard to break into markets if you're on an installation working the transition piece. It's hard to understand from a community standpoint what the need is. Is it truck drivers? Is it mid-level management? Is it assembly line workers? Like these are the questions that an installation needs to know that you don't normally get when you're trying to organize these transition programs. What I will say is you're pushing on an open door if you are working with an installation who does this, right? They want to marry up that supply with the demand. They just don't know what the demand actually is. So this is where chambers of commerce are really important in plugging in there. The workforce type organizations at the local level are huge, and they largely have a connection into these installations. So that's on our structural level. So there's a lot of hurdles. From the individual level, how do NCOs find employment? Well, this is, again, I think more on the employer and less on the individual. You have what you have coming out of the military with NCOs, who are the executors and absolutely the backbone of how successful we are as a nation in our military endeavors. They run the Army for sure. It's what I said earlier. Companies have to get over thinking that they're taking a risk by taking this individual on. No, you're not taking a risk. You have a leader who can learn, who understands the world and how it works. And I think getting over that hurdle, maybe it's an HR thing, maybe it's a company leadership thing. I don't know. You probably don't see it in your company. I think you very much gravitate towards veterans and what they bring to the table, but it is not well known. And I think it starts, honestly, with this, like I kind of started the presentation on, it starts with this divide between the civilian side of the United States and the military side. And until we can get that gap closed, and like forums like this, I think we're still going to have that problem. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, yes, it does. And so we've addressed this gap ourselves. So I'm a disabled vet, and I had the good advantage of going into the better service, the Navy. So very happy with that. But no, this is the challenge. We have well-meaning civilian counterparts
Absolutely.
who genuinely want to support our military, support its service members as they transition. They're well-intentioned. They just don't know how.
That's right.
And so we've got to teach them, and kind of my intended purpose, maybe, I don't know what, 13 years ago, was to create a point on our civilian counterparties experiential database. One point is an anomaly. Multiple points become a trend line and a reference point that they can operate from. But that point needs to be anecdotes of disabled veterans, in my case, military veterans, in the broader military's case, where we demonstrate their capacity to add value to the top line revenue and bottom line profits inside capitalistic organizations in our civilian marketplace. If we can do that, then we're speaking the terms of our civilian counterparties, because we live in a capitalistic society. And if we can populate that experiential database with multiple reference points, then they won't be willing to accept us. They'll be looking for us. That's what we try to do through our organization, in facilitating a pathway where disabled veterans can receive training that becomes the backbone of a skill set that lasts the life of a career, not jobs for veterans, but careers for veterans through the development of a skill set. And we're trying to populate in our industry, institutional finance, the experiential database of hiring managers with reference points where they say, hey, you know what, vets and disabled vets, they're highly sought after commodities in our space. We want to hire them. You, sir, are one of those reference points, right? The way you present yourself, the work that you have done, the work that you will do, you help the rest of our military community in being positively viewed and sought after. So I thank you for that, if nothing else. And I do thank you for your service.
I appreciate that. Thank you for your service too. You just motivated me. That's awesome.
That's great, Jay. And Cal, nice to see you and Susan and team. And we're gonna close it out now, unless there's any last hands that are raising. I don't think so. So to the friends in the audience and to Jeremy, to Jay, I hope this Patriot lunch has been valuable. It provided you an opportunity for a small group dialogue to discuss, to learn, to kind of look behind the curtain on the trials and tribulations and the actions and leadership of Jeremy Bell, Colonel Jeremy Bell, as he served our nation for the past nearly 30 years. And we thank him for that service. Jay has freely chosen to dedicate his life to fight for and to defend our freedom and our way of life, period. So thank you, Jay, for that, and your family, who's also, I think, on the line. That's no small feat on both sides. You know, the family supporting you, and of course you, who are going out into the deep dark recesses of the world. So Jay, on behalf of Bancroft Capital and Corporate America, thank you for your time today, and to our audience, thank you for your time to give and listen. Feel free to reach out to Jay. He's in his transition process. You know, his criteria and his dream job, culture matters. And he's starting his transition now. And he plans to start his next career by this fall. November, December timeframe. You know, hopefully something works out for him sooner, but if he has to take vacation over the holidays, and that's okay too, maybe this January. I'll follow this up with a replay link to everyone on board with his email address and this on the 2 line, so that you can reach out to him, and he's going to reach out to you and coordinate a half-an-hour virtual cup of coffee so he can help better understand your industry and your role and kind of dial it in for him. So thanks for attending. Next Patriot Lunch in 3 months, Thursday, May 11th. Feel free to forward that invite out to your whole network so we can better understand and bridge the divide between these transitioning veterans and corporate America. Share the good news. Hope you guys have a great rest of the fall. Go Eagles. And we'll see you on Super Bowl Sunday, everybody.
Will, thank you very much for what you do. Appreciate your leadership in this endeavor. You make it possible. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Kyle.
Thank you, Colonel Bell. Thank you, Colonel Bell's family.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody.